inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through eyes covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
Oh my god! Yo guys, what is up? Moxsy on Borderlands 4 video, and today we're going over Wildfire Amon. Now, this has been a build that was a bit challenging to put together. We had to get some very specific pieces of gear, but the result has been, in my opinion, the most fun Amon build that I've played. Basically, the goal of this build is to be a full damage over time build. We're utilizing some of Amon's increases to fire damage to proc massive dots on enemies and get double dots and have those dots cause detonations, and detonations are doing some crazy damage on Amon. This build is really proficient at mobbing. You basically one-shot everything that you shoot because you're going to be proccing guaranteed status effects on everything you're shooting. And then for mobbing, you're getting like double damage from explosions and our detonations. It comes together in a really, really cool way, but there's a lot of moving pieces. So I hope to break down everything you guys need to know. Let's do this. Real quick, I just want to plug that myself and Xidax are giving away a PC for the launch of Borderlands 4. This has been running for since launch, but there's only 8 days left. So if you want to enter to win an absolute monster of a PC with like a 5080 in it, there's a bunch of different ways for you to enter. I will leave this in the description so you can go check it out and enter yourself in to win a beast of a PC, and this is shipping worldwide. So we're going to do an overview of the build and then we'll get into the specifics. So we are using Onslaughter on this build. We're not really worrying about using this as like a melee skill. What we are going to be using this as just a kind of like a generic buff. While this is active, we get bonus incendiary damage, we get movement speed, and we get shield regen, all things that are nice for us. But also, while Onslaughter is active, we have a 100% chance to proc basically prime damage on enemies with our guns. Basically, any enemy that we shoot is going to get primed for detonation, which when they detonate is going to basically deal the damage that we dealt to them in an AoE. Now, this is helpful for mobbing. The detonation, like AoE, isn't super nice. However, for bossing, this will basically doubles our damage because we can deal damage and then detonate that damage to reproc again. And we're causing these detonations to deal like multiple millions of damage. Now, because we don't really care about this as much for mobbing, we're going to be focusing on a few things, and one of the most important things is electrical fire. This reads that whenever we burn an enemy, we also shock them, and whenever we shock an enemy, we burn them. Now, these are basically equivalent dots. Now, the dot damage will differ based off of, like, for example, a burn dot will deal more damage to a health bar than a shock dot will, but basically this skill allows us to, in theory, double any dot damage that we are dealing. However, while we're doing fire and shock, we're also stacking up crit chance and crit damage. All of our gun damage is proccing and increasing, or all of our status effects are proccing Bullet Storm for more gun damage. We've got more incendiary damage. We've got a bunch of status effect damage and duration. We've got a bunch of bonus damage things. Basically, we're running around and shooting and proccing status effects on enemies, and these status effects are going to be deleting everything. Now, the way that we are guaranteed proccing status effects is with the primed potency enhancement on Maliwan. Guns with Maliwan licensed parts have a 100% status effect chance on the first bullet after reload. So basically, we're grabbing any Maliwan shotgun that we can, shooting, reloading, shooting, reloading, shooting, and reloading, which is going to give us a 100% chance to proc our status effects, which are going to be doing a ton of damage. And status effects are in this game are dealing increased damage based off of the damage that is proccing them. Meaning, for example, if we like throw a grenade or throw a throwing knife with Dragon's Breath and get a bonus of 200% damage, we're going to get a massive bonus to the dot that is proccing. And because we're constantly reloading, we can use things like bolt action to give us bonus shock damage. Basically, we're pumping up the damage of our first shot out of our gun to proc guaranteed dots with a bunch of bonus damage that will just shred basically everything in our way. For the rest of the skill tree, We're going to be putting points into Berserk, and there is only red to get a bunch of bonus cryo damage. This is just more damage for us. These are some of Amon's strongest skills. I messed around with the like Mortal Flare, Maiming Strike, Detonation stuff, and it just didn't seem all that impactful, to be honest. It didn't seem worth our points. Detonations for like mobbing just seemed a little bit lackluster. Even specking into detonation like radius. In the green tree, we go here for Gathering Storm for 30% more elemental damage. We also going to be grabbing Bolt Action, as I mentioned, for bonus shock damage. But one of the things that's really nice, and we can use a class mod to get more of, is drones. These forged drones will proc whenever we use our forged skill, which we will have decent uptime on. And whenever these melee something, we get more forged skill cooldown. Forged skills are going to be our #1 way to like cause big nuke detonations, which once again aren't really necessary for mobbing, but for bossing or like tanky targets, we basically get 2x damage whenever we're detonating. We're also going to be using the Stormcutter Capstone. The reason for this is because it is going to restore our action skill while it's active so that we can keep it up. And also if our action skill is down, we are going to be getting more cooldown back. It also gives us Ordnance cooldown, which whenever we throw Ordnance, we're going to get like a massive damage increase from Dragon's Breath. So it's helpful in that regard as well. For the guns on this build that we're using, we're going to be mainly using the Sweet Embrace. This is a drop from like tipping Moxsy. You just go to her bar and tip her. You're looking for basically shock and fire versions of these. The shock will roll a higher dot value than fire. If you can get a like shock one with like 5 in the mag, I think that would technically be the god roll. Lower mag size is better because it'll increase the damage that the gun deals. I have an 8 in the mag, so not great. But you can shoot enemies that are shielded with shock and proc huge burn dots because shock has higher base dot and the burn will get the like shock dot. However, it does deal more damage if you're shooting fire at flesh and proccing that because you'll get the 175 or like 75% increase on matching elements. So basically having one of these in shock and fire or just one in both would be massive. Now, for bossing, there's 2 things that we can kind of do. The first is using guns called the Stelliums. Now, these roll some of the highest dot damage for Maliwan guns. Once again, you're looking for low mag size. This is also a high mag size. I've heard of these rolling up to 27,000 dot damage. Mine is 18k, so it's much weaker than it could be. But these doesn't need Beam Tosser, doesn't need Jacobs. You're just looking for the Stellium. These with guaranteed dot procs can be used to just like melt badasses and bosses. However, their projectile speed is really, really slow, so they don't feel good for mobbing. We're mainly just pulling these out for like chunkier targets. And the other thing is with this setup, we can use things like the Dullahan with spread launchers. These spread launchers will get the Dragon's Breath from throwing a grenade or throwing a knife to get guaranteed bonus incendiary damage. With this setup, we're going to be proccing dots with that incendiary, and that dot damage will scale off the damage that we deal. So if we like amp and then shoot this with Dragon's Breath, it'll proc massive fire dots, and that's how we're detonating bosses for like multiple millions of damage. Now for our class mod for bossing, we're going to be using the Furnace. This is really nice because it gives us a guaranteed incendiary damage roll and can roll up to 5 points into Dragon's Breath, which is our #1 source of like big bossing damage. So that is really, really nice for bossing. However, for mobbing, we have a few more options. You can just use the Furnace for mobbing. However, the Blacksmith is really nice because it will roll points into additional Forge drones. So for example, this one's got whenever we activate our Ordnance, which we're always doing, we get Hammer Forge drones, which will go hit enemies and deal melee damage. And it can get the Forge Drone skill. Whenever we activate our action skill, we get Forge Drones. Basically, the more Forge Drones that we have, the more cooldown we will get for our Fist of Stone. So that is quite nice. You can also just equip a Slippy. These are grenades that deal melee damage that bounce and will detonate multiple times on enemies, which basically allows you to throw one and instantly get your Forge skill back, which will give you more uptime on your action skill, more cooldown. Basically, it just feeds into itself. So Slippies are really, really great to pair for mobbing. The Fire Pod is also really awesome. Does a ton of damage, does gun and ordnance damage, and super helpful for this build. I was also using a throwing knife for this build. because of the penetrator augment. However, for a lot of the gameplay, because I was using these, but I was using them for the low cooldown to constantly trigger Dragon's Breath. So there's a lot of gameplay in this that I was just throwing these at the ground just because I wanted to have Dragon's Breath proc. However, you do not need a penetrator knife for like mobbing. It does massively increase our damage for bossing, obviously giving all of our status effects the ability to crit. The other class mod that's really nice for mobbing, if you want to mess around with it, is the Forge Master. This gives us our forge skills the ability to be used twice, so basically double the uptime, and can roll into things to give us more like action skill cooldown or more forge drone uptime. For our Repkit, we've got a triple bypass with amp. This isn't necessary at all. You do want a triple bypass just for the cooldown for your action skill. You could just use a purple, like you'd get more damage just using a purple amp with splash. We don't need to shoot bosses more than once, so it's definitely not needed to roll this with amp. Honestly, just rolling a triple bypass with speed increase would be huge quality of life for mobbing. I'm just kind of using this one as an all-in-one right now, but could definitely squeak out more boss damage with like an amp splash or an amp elemental roll. For our shield, we're using the Sparky shield. This drops from Shadow Pelt. It's not the best shield, to be honest. However, it's kind of fun and it's cool with this build. Basically, whenever our energy shield is not full, we shock enemies. These shocks will proc burn, so we're just getting some like extra dot damage for free on enemies. Just kind of like an on-theme shield. There is probably better options, but I've been enjoying using this one the most. And then for your enhancement, I've got a ridiculous enhancement. This was given to me by a member in chat. This is guns with Maliwan license parts have a 100% status effect chance on the first bullet after reload, and on kill, guns with Maliwan license parts spread their active status effect up to 3 nearby enemies. If you were just using a purple enhancement, I would just rock the primed potency. What we really care about is the guaranteed status effect chance. The spreading is nice, but it's absolutely not needed. And obviously, like the shotgun status effect chance roll is redundant here. It's not actually doing anything for us. All we care about is guaranteeing status effect procs on our first shot, because most of our damage is from status effects. Now, your firmware for this build does absolutely matter. It can do as much as like double our damage. We're going to be using high caliber. High caliber allows our bullets to pierce enemies. We are using splash Maliwan guns, so they can deal their damage again. So, like, if I shoot this guy here through this, let's reload and shoot him. So that's like a 16k dot, right? However, if I shoot and reload and then hit him twice, now I've got a 35k dot. So anytime that you're shooting an enemy, if you're like jumping up and shooting down on them, or if they've got their back to a wall or anything like that, you can effectively just like double your dot damage. So high caliber is super nice. It also gives us more projectile speed, which for the Maliwan guns we're using is super nice, especially the like Stellarium. Just fires really, really slow, so the projectile speed's super great on that. And then we're going to be using 1 point into airstrike to give us 20% splash radius. This is going to give us a much easier time of double hitting with high caliber. And then we're going to be rocking 1 point into heating up, which gives us 20% gun reload speed. This is super, super nice. I opt for this over the splash damage simply because we're shooting and reloading, shooting and reloading, shooting and reloading. 20% reload speed just makes that feel a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. So we're going to be rocking that for the like firmware bonuses. For your specializations, the most important ones are to grab Riddle You This. This gives us 50% gun damage. We're shooting like multi-pellet Maliwans for most of the time. So these stack like, for example, right now I've got 0 stacks. If I shoot this guy, now I've got 8 stacks. Now I've got 26, 38, and 50. So those stack really, really quickly. More gun damage means that we hit harder, which means that our dots proc more. Daredevil, now with caffeine, is super important. We're not really speccing much cooldown because we're using the triple bypass to triple stim to give us a bunch of cooldown back. And then I think Groundbreaker is really, really funny on this build. Basically, non-melee attack damage and slam damage are stored. If you proc a detonation for multiple millions and that by chance doesn't kill something, you could then Groundbreaker melee proc them to deal millions damage again. I haven't found a single boss that's like necessary on, but it is really funny, and I have done some things where I've like killed the boss and then I'll melee like the ad next to him for like multiple millions of damage just for fun. And then lastly, I think it'd be really cool to get Overkill. killing an enemy with a critical hit, or compounding afflictions. We don't really need contamination because we're already getting 100% side effect chance from our specialization, but compounding and overkill could be really fun just to mess around with. Or like bossing rotation, you're going to activate your action skill, syringe for the amp, throwing knife or whatever you want for the dragon's breath, and then shoot. That'll do a bunch of damage, and then you can forge skill for like the big detonation, and if that doesn't kill anything, once again you can like groundbreaker proc, or just like let the dot kill them. I have yet to encounter anything that has lived past the like basically forge skill detonation, and yeah, that just does I think we hit like 40 million there. Most bosses die to like a few million, so definitely a little bit overkill. I don't need like as crazy of stuff, but it is a really fun way to just delete bosses. Guys, that's gonna do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Bye.